Hey guys, tonight we're following a slightly wine-drenched tale full of pirates, lions, and an exceptionally groggy god. You're about to drift into the sleepy folds of ancient Greek mythology, where the gods are less about smiting and more about napping on the job. Picture this: warm salt air, the soft creak of harbor ropes, and one very suspiciously overdressed stranger leaning casually against an amphor like it's a beanbag chair. That's Dionysus, god of wine, revelry, and apparently impromptu sea cruises. You're not entirely sure how you ended up at this dock in Tyrrhenian territory, but here you are. And no, you probably won't survive this if you're expecting anyone to act rationally. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. Always fun to see who's dozing off in which hemisphere. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're wandering a sun-bleached dockside. Ancient wood planks soft beneath your feet, salt crusting at the edges. Somewhere nearby, gulls scream like unpaid interns. The Tyrrhenian port is bustling, but none of it seems to concern the figure swaying gently at the edge of a loading ramp. He's draped in robes that shimmer oddly in the daylight, somewhere between regal and hungover curtain. You slow your steps. Something's off. He doesn't look like a merchant, and his only luggage appears to be a half-finished wineskin and a vague smile. You inch closer, and the man gives you a bleary glance. Boat, he mutters, like it's a word he's trying out for the first time. Then he shrugs and slumps forward, resting his forehead on a crate of salted olives like it's a plush pillow. This is Dionysus, though he hasn't told you that. Not yet. Now, you wouldn't know this unless you had a background in divine identification or wine-saturated theology. But the Greeks have a few gods who walk around incognito, and Dionysus is the king of that particular trick. Historians still argue whether his favorite disguise was young foreign prince or a local guy who never leaves the festival. Tonight, he's rocking both. As you observe the scene, you notice others watching too. A group of pirates if the grimy tunics, sun-scorched arms, and cackling countenances are any indication. They whisper amongst themselves, nudging each other and pointing at the robed sleeper. You sidle closer, partly for better eavesdropping, partly because, well, let's be honest, you're too curious to stop now. The pirate leader, let's call him Rostos, because he looks like a Rostos, scratches his beard and whispers, "He's rich. Look at that belt. Bet he's royal. Maybe Eastern. Phoenician. Even," another grins, "Ransom. Ransom. You." Being the only rational soul in this myth, think, bad idea, but you're also the least likely to be listened to, since pirates famously don't take mythological advice. They hoist the limp Dionysus up with all the delicacy of moving a sack of particularly unhelpful cabbages. He doesn't resist. In fact, he lets out a small snore and mumbles something about missing the symposium. You watch, half horrified, half intrigued, as they lug him aboard their creaky vessel. The pirates cheer like they've already spent the gold. As for Dionysus, he's nestled now on a pile of nets, head resting on one of the ship's coils. He's out cold. You glance around, any signs of divine intervention. Lightning bolts. Plagues of frogs. Nope. Just a god in repose and a dozen pirates about to have a very odd day. You step aboard too. Because why not? You're already part of this dream. And let's be honest, land's not offering much better at the moment. The boat begins to shift. Ropes untied. Sails half lifted by a breeze that wasn't there 5 seconds ago. A flute melody flutters by, but you see no musician. It's going to be that kind of journey. The ship pulls out of the harbor, the pirates chuckling and congratulating each other. "Easy, Ransom," Rastos mutters. He's too soft to be a soldier. Royal for sure. You glance back at Dionysus. He hasn't moved, except to twitch once, dreamily, and drool slightly onto his own arm. As the ship crests the first waves, the crew begins assigning tasks. Some take up oars, some check supplies. Others play a few rounds of guess what region he's from. You lounge near the mast, keeping a safe but curious eye on the man-god nap machine who still hasn't stirred. The sea stretches wide around you, a quilt of glinting blue. The sun is too bright to be friendly, and the wind hums in a new key minor. Slightly off-kilter? Still, no one suspects anything. No one expects vines, lions, or transformation. Just another merchant ship. Just another score. But Dionysus twitches again. It's subtle. His fingers drum softly against the deck. His robe seems to shift colors not like fabric catching the light, but like the colors themselves can't decide who's in charge. And from where you sit, you swear the wood beneath him is starting to grow. Of course, you say nothing. You're just a stowaway in a myth. And besides, what would you say? Excuse me, I think the kidnapped man is photosynthesizing. You close your eyes for a moment, lulled by the movement of the boat and the distant sound of someone trying and failing to play the panpipes. You breathe in sea air, salt and wood tar, and something faintly herbal, like crushed thyme and old vineyard. The ship rocks gently. The pirates laugh, and somewhere, beneath all of it, the god dreams on. You wake though you hadn't meant to fall asleep. The sun's a little higher now, bouncing off the water like a smugly polished mirror. Around you, the ship rolls steadily forward across the open sea. No destination, no compass, just salt air and ambition. The pirates are still chuckling nearby, huddled around a pile of shells and dice, gambling away what few coins they hadn't already mentally spent on their upcoming ransom fortune. You rub your eyes and glance at Dionysus again, still asleep, still smiling that gentle, unsettling smile. He hasn't moved an inch, and yet, there's something. The air around him has changed. Slightly warmer, a bit heady, like you've wandered too close to the herb garden at a temple festival. Rastos saunters by, puffing out his chest. He's nobility, no doubt. He tells a younger crewmate, who's nervously eyeing the odd shimmer around Dionysus. Look at the embroidery. Gold thread, Eastern pattern, Phoenician. I'd bet a jug of decent oil. And why is he smiling like that? The boy mutters. Drunk. Probably. Still, maybe it's some weird Eastern trance. Royal types do that. They walk off, leaving you alone with your very quiet god. You crouch near Dionysus, inspecting him under the pretense of adjusting a loose rope. His breathing is slow and steady, but there's a weight in the air, not tension, more like anticipation. The moment before a festival horn. Something's building, but he sleeps on, lips curved as if he's dreaming about figs or philosophical riddles he once told a grapevine. A pirate sidles past with a tankard, pauses, and dumps the rest of it casually over the side. Should have brought more wine, he mutters. Oh, buddy. The day passes lazily. Some of the crew nap in the sun, shirts unbuttoned, feet dangling over the edges of the boat. Others make half-hearted jokes about the god napper's reward they're about to collect. There's talk of cities they'll visit Delphi, maybe Knossos. Some of them are planning matching tunics. Rastos declares he'll buy a goat with a painted horn and call it fortune. The youngest pirate tries to sketch Dionysus, while avoiding looking directly at him for too long. They're confident, too confident, and as any reader of myths, dreams, or contracts with small print knows, that's when the story tilts. Late afternoon now. The sun's getting syrupy. Golden light glistens across the water. Dionysus lets out a deep sigh in his sleep, then shifts it, just slightly enough that his wine jug rolls lazily across the deck, hits a wooden beam, and comes to rest upright. That's the moment the helmsman starts frowning. You glance back and see him adjusting the rudder, then adjusting it again. His brow creases. Strange current, he says quietly. We've been heading northeast, but it feels like we're circling. The crew laughs. Maybe the gods are dizzy. One quips. Maybe you're dizzy. Another snaps. Mid-stretch, but the helmsman's not joking. He fidgets, pulls out a stone amulet tied to a bit of cord, and mutters something about Poseidon. Not in a prayerful way. In a please don't interfere with our kidnapping kind of way. You look up. The horizon seems slightly off-kilter. You can't explain it. It's still water. Still sky. Still distant clouds, but the symmetry has gone wrong. It's like someone painted the scene in a hurry. Slightly crooked on the canvas. The breeze changes. Warmer now. And carrying a scent you can't place. Not salt. Not rot. More like honey and crushed petals. Maybe wine-soaked wood. Something too rich for the open sea. Dionysus sighs again. His hand twitches. One of the ropes nearest to him begins to curl. Not fray curl. Twisting like it has a mind of its own. It almost looks like... Wait, is that a vine? It is. A green shoot unfurls from the rope coil, wobbling upward like it's stretching for the sun. The pirates don't notice. Not yet. You lean in. Another vine creeps from under a plank near the mast. Leaves sprout mid-curl. One of them pops open with a lazy flap, revealing a tiny cluster of grapes already forming. You blink. You rub your eyes. More are coming now. Dozens of little vines, all creeping gently across the deck. They twirl around oars, sneak through cracks, even climb the anchor chain like they're staging a quiet invasion. It's the slowest, most polite takeover imaginable and also deeply unsettling. Still, Dionysus sleeps, or pretends to. The helmsman finally loses it. He stands, points a shaky hand at the deck. The wood's growing. I swear on my mother's sandals this is cursed. Rastos barks a laugh. It's a ship, not a garden. The helmsman doesn't respond. He's too busy staring at a goblet now sitting squarely next to the helm. It wasn't there earlier. It's made of hammered bronze, embossed with little nymphs doing a conga line, full to the brim with a red wine. Rastos scowls. Who brought wine on deck? No one answers. All eyes slowly turn to the goblet. You, being the unofficial narrator of chaos here, decide to stay silent. From the far end of the deck, a sailor yelps. A vine is wrapped around his foot. He shakes it off, but the movement jolts Dionysus, who rolls slightly, nestles deeper into the netting, and lets out a contented little snore. Unbind him, Rastos growls. Why? Because vines... Because goblets. Because weird air? I don't know, just do it. Two pirates inch forward and start undoing the ropes around Dionysus's ankles. The vines, in a show of flair, gently move aside to let them... They don't resist. They don't need to... Because Dionysus is beginning to glow. Not brightly. Not alarmingly. Just faintly like the last candle at a banquet. Flickering in the wine-scented dark. His skin seems touched by gold. His hair ripples with unseen breeze. His breath smells faintly of time, fig leaves, and something older, something ancient. The goblet near the helm tips over by itself. Wine pours out in a slow, deliberate stream. It spreads across the deck, staining the wood, weaving itself between the vines like a river through a garden. Someone whispers, "We've made a mistake," and somewhere inside your head, a little voice responds, "You think..." So, now you're standing on a slowly greening ship, watching vines unroll themselves like sleepy dancers, and trying very hard not to make eye contact with the glowing, dream-napping deity in the hammock. The crew is tense. Even Rastos, normally bursting with bravado, is doing that thing where people loudly pretend to be in control while deeply regretting their life choices. "Nothing to worry about," he says, voice wobbling. "It's just symbolism. The gods are always throwing signs around. Means nothing. Probably just a blessing. Vines don't usually move like snakes," someone mutters. "Nor do goblets refill themselves." Adds another, and indeed, they are. Several of the spilled cups, now oddly multiplying around the deck like party favors, are bubbling up with new wine. Deep red. Fragrant. Possibly enchanted. Definitely not store-bought. You notice one of the younger pirates, let's call him Melos, cautiously sniff the wine. He dips a finger in, tastes it. "Delicious," he murmurs, eyes glazing slightly. Melos begins humming to himself, sitting down cross-legged among the vines. He's smiling now, plucking invisible notes in the air like there's a lyre only he can hear. Rastos stomps over, shakes him by the collar. "Snap out of it." Melos just giggles. He's dreaming of theater. He whispers, "And honey cakes." And someone named Ariadne. Rastos turns sharply toward you. "Is this some kind of spell?" "Oh, good. You've been promoted from prisoner to suspected enchanter. Progress. The truth is, no one really knows what Dionysus does when he dreams. He's the god of wine, yes, but also of madness, revelry, masks, and transformation. He can be a generous guest or a ruinous force of chaos. And now, cradled in a hammock like a sleepy cat, he's dreaming his way into the ship's reality. More vines creep across the mast. Grapes plump visibly before your eyes. One of the ropes holding the sail has turned entirely into braided ivy. A bird wing. Where did that come from? Flutters down from the rigging. It's not one of the usual seabirds. Too bright. Feathers like painted silk. Beak daintily curved. It sings a warbling little note, then perches on Dionysus' shoulder. He doesn't stir. The pirates gather, low voices arguing. "We should throw him overboard." Someone says, "Don't be ridiculous. That'll just anger him." He's already angry. Look around. Rastos raises a hand for silence. He's not angry. He's asleep. There's still time to fix this. We'll turn the ship. Take him back to the island. Leave him where we found him. And if he wakes up before then, silence. You lean back against the rail, thinking, what does happen if he wakes up now? The myths are unclear. In some versions, he turns the crew into dolphins. In others, he just laughs and pours everyone a drink. Sometimes both. A scholarly voice in your head mutters, historians still argue whether this episode reflects early Dionysian cult practices, or was added later as a cautionary tale against maritime hubris. You decide not to share that aloud. And then just as the crew starts fumbling with the rigging to shift course, Dionysus stirs. Not much. Just a stretch. One arm overhead. A lazy yawn. The kind that makes you feel drowsy just watching it. His eyes flutter open. And oh no, they are not human eyes. They shimmer like polished bronze one moment, then ripple like wine in a goblet. There's depth there. Too much. You feel as if he could see every version of you across time past. Present. And even the one where you became a goat herder instead of a pirate's prisoner. He says softly. Just that, barely more than breath. But it echoes. The vines stop growing. Every leaf lifts slightly, like listening. The crew freezes. Dionysus sits up slowly, graceful as poured syrup. His toga straightens itself. His hair fluffs up as if winded by divine shampoo. The glowing fades just a bit, but it lingers around his fingertips, trailing little sparks of gold. You stole me. He says, a simple statement. No rage, no drama. Just fact. Raisto steps forward, arms spread in what he clearly thinks is a diplomatic posture. Lord Dionysus, great and generous one, we didn't know it was you. We thought that I was wealthy. Dionysus finishes for him. Voice like velvet on a cold night. Rastos nods desperately. That I could be sold. The god continues, stepping off the hammock. The vines part for him like courteous houseplants. That I would panic? Beg? No. Well, maybe a little panic. But Dionysus holds up a hand. The wind stills. I dreamed of olives. He says suddenly. The pirates blink. And of dancing bears. And of a man who thought he could barter with nymphs using cheese. That was a very good dream. I was enjoying it. You stifle a snort. No one else dares. I will forgive you. Dionysus says, smiling now. But I'm bored. A beat? Then. So I'm going to play. And with that, the sea changes. Literally, the water darkens. Then lightens again, but it's not water anymore. It's wine. Deep red. Churning slowly. Sticky and fragrant. The ship rocks slightly as the consistency thickens. The horizon warps, bends, and melts into a swirl of stars and ivy. The pirates stare. One of them faints. Melos claps and giggles. Dionysus spins in place, arms lifted like a stage performer. Let's see how well you sail through a vineyard, he purrs. The ship begins to move not by wind or oar, but by unseen force. The sails fill with perfumed air. The mast sprouts figs. Your shoes are growing moss. You sit down quickly. This is going to get very weird. You're drifting now, not through ocean currents, but through something far more aromatic. The wine sea laps gently at the hull, with an odd glug-glug that sounds like someone decanting a vintage in slow motion. You squint down over the side, expecting maybe a fish or a passing turtle. Nope. A cluster of olives bobs past, followed by what might be a scroll case. A dolphin surfaces, but it's wearing a crown of reeds and lets out what can only be described as a giggle before disappearing again. The pirates are not doing well. Rastos is pacing in tight, unhelpful circles, muttering something about divine trickery and very heavy fines. A few of the crew are now barefoot, whether by choice or because their shoes sprouted roots and took off on their own is unclear. Melos is still playing his invisible lyre. Frankly, he's having a great time. And Dionysus is lounging on a throne of grapes. You're not even sure when or where it appeared. One moment he was barefoot on the gently mossing deck. The next, there's a high-backed, vaguely throne-shaped pile of intertwined grapevines beneath him, each bunch plump and glistening. He's reclined, sipping from a goblet the size of your head, watching the crew like a lazy cat watches birds. Do you ever wonder, he says, apropos of absolutely nothing, how a ship might dance? You blink. Dance. He purrs, swirling his wine. Not sail. Dance. To music. Without wind. Without destination. The ship jolts. Not much. Just a little sidestep, then another. You grab the railing. Yes. The ship is dancing. Not in a chaotic, shipwrecky way. This isn't a storm. It's a tempo. The mast sways to a beat only Dionysus can hear. The sails flutter like dancers' skirts. Somewhere, though, there are no musicians aboard. A faint melody begins to rise. Pipes? A drum? And the eerie sweetness of pan flutes played just slightly off-key. Rastos tries to command the helm, but the wheel won't turn. It spins on its own, gleefully, like a toy in the hands of an invisible child. Historians still argue whether this myth was meant to reflect early ecstatic ritual, or simply to scare sailors into not picking up random glowing hitchhikers. Says your brain helpfully. You lean back, trying to steady yourself. The vines are blooming now, tiny white flowers, fragrant and lazy. You brush one off your sleeve, it grows back. Dionysus stretches, his form shifting slightly in the golden glow. His eyes are now starry black, like looking into a clear night sky after wine number 3. Let's have a story, he says suddenly. I like stories. No one answers. He turns to you. Oh no. Yes. You, he says with a grin. Tell me something boring. You blink. Boring. Yes. Dull. Tedious. Sleepy. Something about taxes, or weather, or shoes. Surprise me. You try not to panic. A part of your brain, the one still pretending you're in control of your life, flips through everything you've ever read. You land on a tale about Mycenaean grain records and their terribly dull method of tracking wheat. You clear your throat? Well, there's a set of tablets from Pylos Linear B script, very dry detailing surplus grain, stored in clay jars called pythoi, marked by month and scribe. Dionysus claps. Perfect. The ship shudders approvingly. You think? Or perhaps just to the beat. Keep going, he says. So you recite everything you remember about how the scribes used ideograms. How the word for barley was a little wedge-shaped symbol. You describe storage cellars and seasonal harvests, and how the taxation system was probably managed by palace administrators who wore uncomfortable sandals. Dionysus leans back, eyes half closed. Yes, let the tediousness flow. Melis joins in, riffing an improvisational tune on his imaginary lyre. It is shockingly appropriate. The rest of the crew watches in stunned silence as you, the prisoner, lull a god back into a gentle daze with ancient grain records. Eventually, Dionysus waves a lazy hand. Enough. You've earned your feet. For now, which you hope means he won't turn you into a goat. The ship begins to rise, not sink, not fall rise, as if the wine beneath it has become something thicker, more buoyant. The deck creaks. The wind is that lavender, carries you upward. You pass through low-hanging clouds made of steam and misted rosewater. A cicada chirps from somewhere in the mast. Rastos sits down heavily beside you, for once completely out of things to say. So, he mumbles, we're just floating now. You nod. Through wine. Apparently, because we kidnapped a god. You nod again. He rubs his face with both hands and mutters, never again. I'm sticking to grain smuggling. At least Barley doesn't talk back. Dionysus hums a few bars of a tune. It might, if you listen hard enough, he says without opening his eyes. A new sound joins the music, a rustling. Like wind and leaves, you glance upward and see that the sails have turned entirely into tree branches. Olive, perhaps, or fig. A small owl roosts in the crow's nest, looking unimpressed. Then the god speaks again, soft and languid. Do you know what pirates are to me? You don't answer. Story fuel. He says, myths need them. Like spice in wine, a little danger, a little foolishness. Without them, I'm just a man on a ship. You resist the urge to point out that he is definitely not just a man. The stars above you are swirling now, forming shapes drunken lions, tumbling dancers, a goat on a skateboard. No, that's probably your imagination. But one thing's certain, you're not in the mortal world anymore. At least not entirely. There's no map for this place. You've passed through wine, sky, a constellation shaped suspiciously like a lounging cat. And now the ship coasts across cloud, mist, something pillowy, faintly luminescent, and suspiciously scented like spiced pears. The deck's gotten softer underfoot, mossy, springy. Every now and then, a mushroom pops up between the planks, blooming like it's stretching after a long nap. One pirate tried to pluck one. It squeaked and vanished. No one's tried again. Dionysus hums a tune. You recognize it. Vaguely. A festival chant. A lullaby. Hard to say. It dances just outside the edge of memory. His throne of grapes is now surrounded by actors. Actual actors. Where they came from, no one knows. They're rehearsing a tragedy and a comedy at once. Switching masks mid-scene. One sobs. The next snorts. And then they swap again. One of them is definitely a goat, though it's reading lines with great conviction. Ratistos is pacing again. We've gone mad, he mutters. This is a fever dream. A bad fish. A head injury. It's the mushrooms. It's a god. You offer gently. He squints at you, then at Dionysus. He's lounging. Gods don't lounge. You raise an eyebrow. Have you met many... He grumbles something about Hermes being at least professional. The ship slows. You didn't feel it coming, but now you're drifting into what looks at first glance like a floating harbor. The dock is made of clouds, anchored by ropes woven from stars. There are other ships here, impossibly shaped. One has sails of feathers. Another appears to be pulled by two oversized beetles wearing tiny saddles. Welcome, says a voice. You look up us. A woman in an elaborate golden mask stands on the dock. She holds a clipboard. Her robe is the exact color of wet pomegranate seeds. She checks something off with a quill that writes itself. She says, God on board class. Dionysus variant. You're late. Rastos opens his mouth to argue, but wisely closes it again. The masked woman waves you onward. This way, please. He's requested a performance. Now, You'd think the crew would resist being herded into a celestial amphitheater made entirely of cloud marble and floating seats that mold themselves to your exact sitting preferences, but after everything else, they just go with it. You included, the amphitheater is crowded, not with mortals, not with gods, either with something in between. Memories, dreams, shadows of people who almost existed. It's unclear. One of them turns to you and offers popcorn made of ambrosia flakes. You take some. It tastes like childhood and confusion. Dionysus walks down to the front row, takes his seat, and gestures. The stage lights up. The play begins. It's about you, or at least a version of you, a slightly more heroic, slightly better postured you, who valiantly tricks pirates, tells stories, and definitely doesn't spend several minutes hiding behind a barrel. The actor playing Rostos is unflattering but accurate. The version of Dionysus is taller and somehow always backlit by dramatic fireflies. The real Dionysus giggles. I wrote it just now, he whispers. Improv theater is divine. You watch as you negotiates with dolphins, climbs ropes made of fermented dates, and sails through clouds shaped like philosophical questions. It's oddly moving. One pirate dabs at his eye. Melos is openly sobbing. Historians still argue whether mythic reenactment rituals like this were part of Dionysian cult ceremonies, or simply elaborate divine inside jokes, murmurs that scholarly voice in your head. You nod slowly. Makes sense. Halfway through the performance, the beetle-drawn ship crashes through the backdrop. A goblet of stars spills across the stage. Everyone applauds. The play continues without a hiccup. By the end, the audience is clapping, not in a loud, frantic way, gently, like waves, like the patter of rain on a temple roof. Dionysus stands and bows not for the play, but for you. Well done, he says. You've been very entertaining. You try to thank him, but your tongue is heavy. Maybe it's the altitude, or the divine popcorn, or the creeping suspicion that you're being gently nudged toward transformation. And then he says it. As a reward, I shall let you choose. The crew stirs. Choose. You ask it. He nods. You may return to your world, your dull little mortal sea, or stay here, a place of floating theater, eternal wine, myth and sleep and story. Rostos leans over. We're not actually considering staying here, are we? Melos raises a hand. I vote we stay. You don't get a vote. Rastos snaps. I brought snacks, Melos replies, pulling a cloud grape from his pocket. Dionysus raises a hand. Only the storyteller may choose. Oh, so that's you. You look around. The crew, the vines, the stage, the god who naps and dreams and turns boredom into miracles. And you wonder, quietly, when exactly you stopped being a prisoner. You don't answer right away. How could you? The question hangs in the air like incense, slow, curling, heavy with implication. Dionysus doesn't press out. He just watches you with the sort of expression only a god can pull off. Part mischief, part eternity, and part gentle curiosity, as though he's seen you in 100 lives before, and is mildly amused by the choices you've made in all of them. Behind him, the stage resets itself. The masks walk off on their own legs. The goat actor gives a satisfied snort and hops onto a golden chariot made entirely of figs. The audience drifts out like steam from a bathhouse, murmuring softly, still applauding in that wave-like rhythm. You glance at Rastos. He's picked up a souvenir program that reads, A Tragedy in 4.5 Wines, and is flipping through it like it might contain an escape plan. Melos is eating his cloud grapes and offering them to anyone nearby. No one declines. Can I think about it? You ask Dionysus. He smiles. Of course. There's no rush in eternity. You sigh. Of course there isn't. Back on the ship, yes. You're on the ship again. Though how you got there is hazy, it's quiet. The stars above you seem closer. One is definitely winking at you. The sails are back to being canvas, but faint vine imprints still cling to the ropes. The rudder hums softly, steering itself. You're moving again. No longer docked at the heavenly harbor, but not quite sailing in mortal seas either. Somewhere in between. Below deck, someone snores. Probably Melos. Rostos mutters in his sleep about taxes and sardines. You sit on a barrel and look out over the edge. The sea is made of ink now, not water. Ink, deep, dark, and swirling. Every so often, words appear on its surface in looping ancient script, then vanish before you can read them. You could swear one spelled your name. Dionysus appears beside you, wine in hand, a lazy grin on his face. Did I ever tell you about the time I turned a theater into a vineyard? He asks. You shake your head. Ah, that was a good one, he says, and settles in. So, there was this city, don't remember the name. Doesn't matter. They tried to ban my festivals. Said I was too loud, too lewd, too disruptive. He grins. So, I visited quietly, bought a ticket to a tragedy, sat in the back, waited until the lead actor hit his big monologue. And then poof vines, grapes, barrels of wine in every seat. The chorus turned into satyrs. Audience, too drunk to object. The tragedy ended with a conga line and a goat juggling olives. You chuckle. Sounds like justice. He shrugs. Sounds like me. You let the silence hang for a while. It's a good silence. A soft one. The kind that wraps around your shoulders like a well-worn shawl. Do you think they wrote all these myths because they were scared of you? You ask eventually. Dionysus tilts his head. Yes. Fear makes good stories. But others wrote because they knew boredom is the real enemy. He looks at you with those starlit eyes again. You're a storyteller. You know the truth. All gods fade without someone to whisper about them when the fire's low. You think about that. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was primarily a fertility god, a theater deity, or simply a divine excuse for a good party, murmurs the ever-helpful corner of your brain. You look at him again, this lounging, vine-crowned, wine-sipping mystery, and think, maybe he's all three. And also something else entirely. The ship gives a lurch, not a dangerous one, more like a polite nudge. You stand, and the deck beneath your feet is firmer now. Real wood, real waves. The clouds are gone, replaced by a dark, glassy sea that glimmers with moonlight. Land appears on the horizon. Actual, mortal. Sand and rock land. Rastos appears at your elbow, bleary-eyed. Are we back? Sort of, you say. Melos stumbles up, rubbing his eyes. Do we still owe someone money? Probably, says Rastos. Dionysus stands behind you, stretching. Time for me to go. You frown. Just like that, he grins. Mortals don't need gods clinging to their ankles, especially not ones who turn ships into musical theaters. The crew gathers, hesitant. They're not sure whether to bow or hide. Melos offers him the last grape. Dionysus accepts it with an exaggerated wink, and then, just as casually as he appeared, he's gone. No flash of light, no thunderclap, just gone. Only the faint scent of honeyed wine lingers in the air. You stand in silence for a long moment. Then Rastos sighs. I'm going back to grain smuggling. Melos raises a finger. What if we start a theater company? No, says Rastos. A vineyard? You suggest, still no, a mythological storytelling tavern with a small goat cabaret. Rastos just walks away. You smile. Turning back to the sea, somewhere out there, a god naps, dreams, and rewrites the stars one sip at a time. And you have a story. One no one will believe, but they'll listen anyway. You dock quietly, in a sleepy little cove that probably doesn't exist on any map. The harbor smells of warm salt, pine resin, and something sweet baking in a clay oven. There's a faded sign leaning sideways near the dock. It reads, in weathered Ionian script, "Welcome, try the olives." Rastos grumbles about splinters and mutinous seagulls as he ties off the ship. Melos kisses the deck and then immediately regrets it. It's still sticky, he mutters, wiping his mouth. Like fermented raisins, the village beyond is half empty and sun-drenched. The kind of place where donkeys outnumber people and everyone seems to be napping or weaving baskets. A cat watches you from a rooftop, yawns, then promptly falls asleep in a pile of figs. You wonder. Your sandals crunch on gravel. The streets are too quiet for a port town. No shouts, no hagglers, not even a stray loot. Just the rustle of olive trees in the breeze and the occasional distant clink of pottery. Eventually, you stumble upon a tiny temple. It's older than it should be. The roof sags in a respectful kind of way. Inside, there's a statue of Dionysus, not as you knew him on the ship, but a different version, stately, serene, wine cup raised in quiet welcome. No grinning, no lounging, just calm. You sit on the cool stone floor. The air smells like lavender and dust. And then you hear it. Not a voice. Exactly. More like a feeling pressed behind your ears. A whisper in your bones. Remember, you blink. The statue winks. You don't scream. That would be rude. You simply nod, stand, and exit with the solemn dignity of someone who's just been psychically winked at by a marble deity. Outside, Rastos has acquired a loaf of something delicious smelling. Melos has befriended a goat named Polybus. Neither seems surprised when you inform them the statue spoke to you. Mine told me to invest in olive futures, says Melos. Sound financial advice. Mine told me to stop eating oysters on even-numbered days. Rastos grunts. You blink. The statue spoke to both of you. Rastos shrugs. We're very compelling conversationalists. You begin to suspect Dionysus is still watching, just subtly. Through goats, through statues, through oddly timed bakery sales. Historians still argue whether localized cults of Dionysus incorporated household idols that could speak through hallucination, fermented dreams, or overly persuasive theater troupes. Your inner fact voice helpfully supplies. You continue your walk through the village, past doorways painted in indigo, past herbs drying on twine. The villagers smile but don't ask questions. Maybe they've seen others like you, wanderers brushed by gods, dripping with myth and not entirely sure how to behave at dinner. Eventually, you find a tavern. Of course you do. It's halfway carved into a hill and covered in grapevines that grow without any visible support. The sign reads, "The Sleepy Satyr." It seems fitting. Inside, it's dim and cool. The kind of cool that's been aged properly, like a cellar or a particularly wise grandfather. You sit. A woman appears, asks nothing, brings you a cup of something warm. It tastes like spiced honey, night air, and barely restrained laughter. There's a lyre in the corner. No one plays it. You get the feeling it plays itself when no one's looking. Behind the bar is a mural painted in long, looping strokes. It shows Dionysus again, mid-nap, surrounded by figures that look suspiciously like you and your crew. One of them has Melos' exact hair. Another is definitely Rostos, arguing with a donkey. You sip again. You lean back. This is peace. You think not a big, dramatic peace, but the quiet kind? The kind that comes after a storm, or a play, or a very long nap. Melos bursts in, covered in goat fur and olive oil. "Polybus is a celebrity here," he says breathlessly. They offered him a job. Rostos follows, holding a scroll. "This place has forms. I had to sign something that may or may not sell my soul in exchange for fresh bread." You nod slowly. Seems fair. The barkeep places a plate of figs in front of you. No charge. You chew in silence, each bite slowly bringing you further down from wherever the clouds had taken you. The memory of the divine performance fades just enough to feel like something you dreamed. Something possible but untouchable. Like trying to hold moonlight in your hands. You're almost fully mortal again. Almost. Night falls like a heavy curtain. Quiet and velvet thick. The tavern glows in soft amber light. Lanterns swing gently overhead, casting fig-shaped shadows on the walls. You find yourself tucked into a corner booth. Sand still in your sandals. Salt still in your hair. And a slow warmth curling behind your ribs. It might be the wine, or it might be the aftertaste of divine mischief. Melos is playing dice with Polybus. The goat is winning. Rostos is asleep, snoring lightly into a basket of complimentary bread. The woman from behind the bar reappears not walking. Exactly, but more like sliding between moments. She sets down a small bowl of what might be lentils, or possibly fermented pomegranate seeds. Either way, it's delicious and mysteriously hot. She doesn't say anything, just taps a finger on the edge of your cup, once, and points to a small door in the back of the tavern. Then she's gone again, like a candle blown out, mid-thought. You hesitate. Then you stand. The door opens without a sound. You step through, and once again, reality changes its rules. You're no longer in the tavern. You're in a garden, a lush, overgrown tangle of vines and blossoms and absurdly smug-looking statues. The air is thick with the scent of jasmine, and something that might be toasted marshmallow. Somewhere, very faintly, a flute is playing itself in a key that doesn't exist. In the center of the garden is a table, and at the table is Dionysus. Again, naturally. He's wearing a robe made of dreams and regret, sipping something from a horn shaped like a pelican. There's a smear of honey on his chin, and a stack of ancient board games beside him. "Took you long enough," he says. "The goat figured it out hours ago." You sit. He leans in, conspiratorial. "Do you want to see how it started?" You blink. "What do you mean?" He gestures vaguely. The garden around you shifts, and suddenly you're in ancient Thrace. Not metaphorically, not as a visitor, but you who now smells like crushed time and yesterday's thunder are in a real, dusty, goat-filled village in Thrace. There's a younger version of Dionysus walking through the streets. No crown, no wine, just a staff and a look of absolute, bewildered confidence. The villagers part for him, wary. A few women throw herbs. One offers cheese. A child hides behind a pot. Historians still argue whether the earliest worship of Dionysus began in Thrace, Phrygia, or somewhere even older. Beyond the borders of written memory, whispers your brain, sounding oddly scholarly for someone currently barefoot in a divine hallucination. The young god stops at a tree, touches it. The tree erupts in fruit. And just like that, the world rewinds again. You're in Phrygia now, mountain slopes and pine wind. The thrum of drums in the distance. People dancing in spirals around a bonfire. Their faces lit with ecstatic joy or possibly confusion. It's hard to tell. The rhythm of the drums burrows into your spine. This was before the pirates, Dionysus explains, sipping from his cup. Before the thyrsus, before the feasts. Just raw worship. Music. Madness. Mirth. Before the myths, you ask. He smiles. There were always myths, even before I was born. You think about that. About a god being shaped by stories before he even enters them. That's the thing about Dionysus. He's not just a god of wine and revelry. He's a god of transformation, of boundaries blurred, of things that are not what they appear, and things that only appear once you stop trying to name them. He offers you the horn. You sip, and you are somewhere else again. Not a place this time, but a memory. Your own, a childhood festival. A fake beard made of moss. The way your mother laughed when you danced too hard and knocked over a tray of roasted dates. A sensation of joy so overwhelming. You thought your chest might split open from it. Dionysus watches you quietly. That was yours. He says. You hand back the cup. I thought I was here to learn about you. You murmur. He leans back, folding his hands behind his head. Same thing. The garden rustles. You are back in your seat. The night in the tavern has shifted. Outside, cicadas drone, and a warm wind stirs the vines. No one seems to have noticed you left. Even Polybus still has a dice in his mouth. You close your eyes for a moment, letting everything settle. There are gods who demand offerings. There are gods who hurl thunderbolts and rewrite empires. And then there's Dionysus who tells you a story, hands you a cup, and changes you while you're laughing. You stretch. Melos raises an eyebrow. You look like you napped through a philosophy lecture. You smile. In a way, you say... Rastos snorts. Did you talk to a statue again? No. You say, this time it was a garden. He pauses. Yeah. That tracks, so you lean back, letting the moment stretch. A sleepy tavern. A goat named Polybus. Warm bread and the echo of laughter that isn't quite gone yet. There's peace in not understanding everything. You wake not because of a sound, but because your body just knows. The kind of waking that happens when something important is about to happen. Or already did. And your dreams didn't get the memo. The tavern is dark now. Not night dark, but dream dark. Candle shadows lengthen into corners they shouldn't reach. Even the goat is asleep, one leg twitching in a rhythm suspiciously close to a samba. You stretch. Slowly. The way a person does when they're trying to decide if they're still part of a myth, or just hungover from olive oil fumes. Rastos is already up. He's eating what appears to be leftover baklava with a knife. Melos is snoring gently into his arm. His other arm curled protectively around Polybus. You consider waking him, then decide against it. Anyone dreaming about goat diplomacy deserves a few more minutes of peace. You step outside. The stars are loud. Not in sound, but in presence, they seem closer. Like someone dragged the sky down a bit for maintenance. You can see the Milky Way in full swirly chaos, like a god spilled sugar on velvet. The town is silent, but in the distance you hear it. The sea and laughter. You follow both. The shoreline is silver with moonlight. Waves lap against the rocks in slow, deliberate motions, as if they, too, are contemplating the nature of reality. And there on a rock sits Dionysus. Again, you really need to start expecting this. He's barefoot now, legs swinging like a child's. A wine jug sits beside him, half empty or half full, depending on your optimism levels. You sit beside him. The rock is warm from divine ambiance, or possibly just residual magic. He doesn't look at you, just gestures toward the horizon. There, he says softly. That's where they took me. You squint. The pirates. He nods. The waves seem to shift, forming shapes. A ship. Men. Ropes. Confusion. A god pretending to sleep. Then chaos. Vines bursting from nowhere. Sailors screaming. Dolphins leaping like backup dancers. But you let them take you. You say slowly. He smiles. Of course I did. Why? He shrugs. Because sometimes the best way to teach someone they've made a mistake is to let them make it. You think about that. About all the small, quiet ways people learn. About how Dionysus didn't punish his captors with fire or swords, but with wonder, with impossibility, with transformation. Historians still argue whether the pirate story is allegory, parable, or post-facto propaganda. Your brain notes, you politely tell it to shush. The god stretches, they never expected me to be real. He says, no one ever does, until the vines show up. That seems inconvenient. It's hilarious. He grins. Also, deeply character building. You lie back on the rock, watching the sky spin slowly. I think I get it now. You murmur, Do you? Maybe not. But I get something. He nods, as if that's the best kind of answer. Then, from behind you, a distant trumpet. Melos. You turn to see him standing on a hill, holding a sea conch like it's a bugle and wearing a crown of parsley. He's shouting something about declaring the local tavern a sacred site. Rastos trudges behind him, dragging a barrel. Polybus follows, balancing a candle on his back like a tiny, cloven-footed sconce. Dionysus chuckles. Your crew's quite the chorus. I think we're part of the play now. You sigh. He raises an eyebrow. Now, fair point. You rejoin them as Melos declares himself temporary wine pope and attempts to consecrate a breadstick. No one objects. It seems spiritually sound. Together, you sit by the sea, passing the jug, sharing stories that feel ancient and new at the same time. You laugh too loud. You yawn in tandem. The night folds around you like a well-loved blanket. You don't ask Dionysus any more questions. Not because you're afraid of the answers, but because you finally understand that some stories aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be felt, like music, or dreams, or the faint sensation of moss growing on the inside of your logic. The sea glimmers, the stars hum white, and you, little mortal traveler, you are full not with knowledge, but with something better, wonder. You wake up with seaweed in your hair and sand in places that probably shouldn't be sandy, sitting upright against a driftwood log that smells faintly of rosemary and regret. Someone's draped a tapestry over your shoulders that's embroidered with dolphins, grapes, and a very unflattering depiction of a satyr playing the kazoo. Melos is face down in a tide pool, singing to a crab. Drastos is trying to make breakfast by heating olives over a candle. Polybus, naturally, looks the most dignified, lounging regally on a rock like he's Poseidon's emotional support animal. You stretch slowly, muscles slightly sore from whatever interpretive dance you apparently performed during the night. The shoreline is quieter now, as if the world is exhaling. No god in sight, no echo of flutes or divine laughter. Just morning, but the quiet doesn't last, because from the distance, muffled slightly by fog, you hear applause. You squint toward the hills. There, standing on a ridgeline like badly organized tourists, is a full amphitheater's worth of people, some wearing togas, some in goat masks, a few holding fig branches like VIP passes. Oh no, you whisper. Oh yes, says Melose, who has joined you now, seaweed still trailing from his ears. You've been cast. Cast in what? He gestures toward the rising sun. The trial of the pirates. You blink. Raisos walks past holding a scroll that is, frankly, way too long for this hour. You're playing the role of mortal who watches stuff happen, in which is a very prestigious position. Minimal lines, high emotional stakes. Do I get a costume? Polybus snorts. You don't even ask how they built a full amphitheater overnight. At this point, causality is more of a suggestion than a rule. Soon, you're ushered into the performance space, really just a wide circle marked by rocks and garlands. The audience, local fishermen, several stray cats, a confused-looking philosopher with 3 notebooks, one donkey wearing a laurel wreath. The play begins. It's elaborate. There's a chorus of oiled-up shepherds. There's a giant papier-mâché ship that makes 3 full rotations before collapsing under the weight of a too enthusiastic mime. There's a dramatic reenactment of Dionysus sleeping peacefully in the cargo hold, while pirates argue over whether or not he's just a weirdly decorative nobleman. Historians still argue whether the pirates mistook Dionysus for a prince, a priest, or just a very well-moisturized drifter. The chorus sings in almost harmony. You're honestly impressed by the commitment. At one point, Melos appears wearing a fake beard and a crown of sardines, portraying the captain of the pirate crew with the kind of intensity usually reserved for tragic kings and overcooked baklava. He monologues. He weeps. He gets attacked by a stage vine operated by 3 teenagers in tunics. Then, the climax, the divine transformation. The ship shudders represented here by 3 men, shaking cardboard waves and shouting, "Ooh, no!" And suddenly, all the actors portraying pirates leap into the air, toss off their robes, and reappear as dolphins. Actual dolphins. No. Really, you blink and rub your eyes. But there they are arcing through the bay in synchronized jumps, wearing little sashes that say, "Redeemed." Were those? Yep, says Rastos, munching on a grape. Former pirates. Happens all the time. You lean back on the grass, watching the dolphins spiral through the surf. This is the weirdest dream I've ever had. He chuckles. You say that every time. The play ends with a standing ovation, a rain of rose petals, and someone releasing a dozen doves who immediately roost in the snack vendor's fig basket. It's beautiful. and deeply chaotic. Later, you wander backstage, or what counts as backstage when the stage is technically a field. You find Dionysus again. He's cleaning grape juice off his sandals with a very tiny sponge and humming something suspiciously like an 80s synth ballad. Well, he asks, not looking up. I think I'm still processing. He smiles. That's the only correct response. You sit beside him. I didn't know myths could be so performative. He laughs. All myths are performances. Even the ones you only tell yourself. You nod slowly. So the pirates were their real side? Oh, absolutely. He says, picking a petal out of his hair, but also not really. Helpful. You're welcome. You lean your head back, letting the warmth of the sun soak into your eyelids. Everything smells like thyme, fig juice, and the distant hint of goat shampoo. And for once, you're not trying to figure it all out. You're just here, in the moment, in the myth. Maybe that's the point. Later that same day, or maybe much later, because time here seems to work more like melted honey than clockwork, you find yourself drifting inland. Not far. Just beyond the fig trees in the amphora storage area, past a field where someone is apparently trying to train pigeons to juggle. You need space to think, or maybe you need space not to think. Hard to tell anymore. The path you follow is mostly dust, scattered with olive pits and the occasional sandal strap. It leads you to a low hill dotted with marble fragments and wildflowers growing at odd angles. It smells like lavender and last year's wine festival. At the top of the hill sits a woman, alone, quiet. She wears a crown of ivy and holds a long staff topped with a pine cone, a thyrsus. If your memory serves, you're pretty sure she's one of Dionysus's companions, though she seems more librarian than reveler. You sit near her, not close enough to be rude, but close enough for your presence to be acknowledged. She doesn't look at you, just says, "You're not from here." Nope, yet here you are. Seems to be the theme. A pause. Then she says, "Most mortals don't get this far." They hear divine nonsense and turn back. You shrug. "I'm here for the nap content." Mostly. She chuckles. Then you've come to the right place. The hill offers a wide view of the coast. You can still see the dolphins leaping far off, little gray commas breaking the blue sentence of the sea. The village below has returned to its usual rhythms, bread baking, old men arguing about shadows, goats gently plotting rebellion. It feels oddly peaceful. So, about those pirates, you ask, trying to sound casual. The woman smiles faintly. Ah, them. Did they really turn into dolphins? Or was that, like, symbolic? Why not both? She stands now, her robe rustling like soft parchment. You mortals always want truth in the shape of a fact. She says, but myth isn't about facts. It's about the shapes truths leave behind. That sounds suspiciously profound for this early in the afternoon. She gestures toward a cracked bit of marble at your feet. That used to be a statue of Dionysus. You know, people danced here, offered honey cakes, told stories that no one bothered to write down. What happened? Time, she says simply. And forgetfulness. You look down at the marble. The faintest curve of a carved chin remains. Maybe a lip. Maybe just erosion. Hard to tell. But, she continues, he still comes here every few centuries. For the nap. For the chaos. For the reminders. You think about that. About gods needing reminders. About myths needing updates. About how some truths get retold. Not because they happened, but because they still happen. The woman sits again. This time closer. You know, she says, Dionysus is one of the only gods who ever died. You blink. Wait, what? Oh, yes. As a baby, torn apart by titans. But he came back. Twice. Actually, that doesn't sound restful. It wasn't, but it gave him perspective. Historians still argue whether Dionysus's death and rebirth myths reflect agricultural cycles, early mystery cults, or just the Greeks being really into dramatic baby stories. Your brain whispers helpfully. You swat that thought away. So he knows what it's like. You say slowly, to be mortal, to lose things, to not be in control. She nods. And that's why he naps. In places like this. Maybe. Or maybe he just likes the breeze. You both sit in silence for a while, watching petals fall from a nearby fig tree. Eventually, the woman turns to you again. You could stay. You know, not forever. But for a while, you're tempted. But something stirs. Not urgency. Exactly. Just a gentle nudge. The kind you feel when you finished a chapter in a really good book. I think I need to go, you say softly. Of course. She doesn't ask where. She just hands you a pouch leather. Worn, faintly warm to the touch. For the journey, she says. You peek inside. It holds a few grapes, a carved charm shaped like a dolphin, and what appears to be a tiny map scrawled in eyeliner. You smile. Thanks. Don't lose the charm, she says. It bites, naturally. As you walk down the hill, the wind picks up, and for a moment, you swear you hear laughter again? Faint, distant, carried on the sea air, like someone finding their favorite memory in the attic. You don't turn around. Some stories end best with your back to them. Your sandals squelch slightly as you walk an unfortunate side effect of stepping in what you hope was grape mash near the amphora pit. You're headed inland now, guided only by the crude eyeliner map and your increasingly fragile sense of direction. The landscape changes as you go. Less coastline, more thickets of cypress trees and the occasional low ruin that might once have been a bathhouse. A shrine, or just a very ambitious chicken coop. The scent in the air shifts, too from briny sea mist to pine resin and thyme, with a background note of old scrolls and storytelling. Eventually, you find a path, not marked, but unmistakably worn by centuries of footsteps, some human, some hoofed, and one set of footprints that looks suspiciously like a man with one really confident toe. It leads to a grove, and in the grove, statues, dozens of them, some cracked, some tilted, all exquisitely detailed, as if their sculptors had tried very hard to make marble feel like it could breathe. One is of Dionysus again, of course lounging against a wine jar, looking halfway between divine ecstasy and just 5 more minutes. His expression, though sleepy, seems amused. You approach another figure, a woman mid-dance, caught in a moment of pure abandon. Her hair is carved to look like it's moving in slow motion. A vine coils up her leg. At her feet, a tiny marble hedgehog. Historians still debate whether these groves were actual Dionysian sanctuaries, performance spaces, or rural party zones that got really out of hand. You think? Once again channeling the voice of the very tired classicist who lives in your brain. There's movement nearby, a soft rustle, not alarming, more like the gentle rearranging of someone settling into a nap. You turn to see a man dressed in robes that shimmer like watered silk. His beard is slightly uneven. His eyes, even from a distance, are unmistakably wine dark. He's leaning against a tree, not a statue, the actual Dionysus. Again, you found the archive, he says, as if you've just wandered into a library. I followed the eyeliner map. Melos' work. He's a romantic and a menace. You walk closer. Dionysus gestures for you to sit on a mossy bench that appears to have grown there specifically to be convenient. These statues, you ask, are they tributes? Some others are memories, leftovers from dreams, things people try to remember. But sculpted instead, that one has a hedgehog. He beams. Yes, that was a good night. He kneels beside one of the statues, this one of a satyr, caught mid-cartwheel and brushes moss from its base. Mortals always want something to last, he says. Even joy. You nod. There's a long silence, but not an awkward one. Then he says, you know, I never asked your name. You blink? I don't think I know it. Even better. He leans back against the tree. Names are heavy. You wear them too long. They start to shape your spine. So what should I go by? He thinks. How about the one who listened? You're not sure whether that's a name, a compliment, or a gentle warning. He claps his hands once, and from nowhere, a small procession appears, 3 nymphs carrying bowls of water. A satyr with a pan flute, and someone who looks like they lost a bet with a hedgehog. Time for your final trial. Dionysus says solemnly, you stiffen. Oh no, relax, he says. It's a wine tasting. You exhale. Oh no again. The satyr pours a splash of deep red liquid into a terracotta cup and hands it to you. It smells like late summer afternoons and bad decisions. You sip, and suddenly you're somewhere else. Not physically, but vividly. You're in a courtyard lit by torches. People are dancing, not wildly, but slowly. Like the night itself is swaying. There's laughter, and not the performative kind. Real, chest-deep laughter that makes you feel like your ribs are instruments. Someone sings in a language you don't know, but understand anyway. And someone maybe you starts to cry, not from sadness, but from relief. You return to yourself slowly, like floating up from warm water. Dionysus is watching you. First press, he says. From the island where we lost track of time and invented 4 kinds of singing, you don't reply. You're still catching your breath. He stands now, brushing pine needles from his sleeves. I'll be leaving soon, he says. Storm to ride. Cave to nap in. Maybe a poetry slam in Naxos. You nod. But before I go, he says, you should know something. He leans in, smiles, and whispers. This story was never about the pirates. Then he straightens and walks away, no fanfare, no thunderclap, just the faint scent of crushed grapes trailing behind him. You sit there in the grove a while longer, letting the silence settle back around you. The statues remain still. The trees sway gently. The wind hums something that might be a lullaby or might be an old joke. No one remembers anymore. And you think about the story, the god, the nap, and the way myths wrap themselves around people not to explain things, but to comfort them. You lie down on the mossy bench. Let your eyes drift closed. You've earned this one. You wake up, or at least, you think you do. It's hard to tell when your dreams and your daylight start using the same wallpaper. Still lying on the mossy bench in the grove. You open your eyes to find the light has shifted. The air has cooled slightly. Somewhere in the distance, a lazy flute meanders through a tune with no particular place to be. No sign of Dionysus. No more statues moving or whispering. Thankfully. Just quiet. You sit up, stretch, and feel the slight crick of having napped on something older than democracy. Your back sounds like a tiny orchestra tuning up. Down the path a little. You see what looks like a resting donkey wearing a crown made of celery. You squint. The donkey squints back. You're real, you ask. Because at this point, it's worth checking. The donkey blinks. You blink. You walk past it. And it makes a noise somewhere between a bray and a sigh, which feels like fair commentary. As you make your way back toward the village, or whatever passes for the village in this wobbly corner of mythology, you begin to notice something. The world is winding down. Just a bit. Colors a touch paler. Shadows stretching slightly longer than physics would strictly allow. And when you pass under a fig tree, a single fig drops into your hand. It's perfectly ripe, slightly warm, and filled with the quiet confidence of a fruit that knows it's the dessert and the prize. There's someone waiting for you at the next bend in the path. A tall man with a slight stoop, carrying a long staff topped with a curling vine. He has the look of someone who once gave very good advice and is now just waiting for someone to ask for it again. You're almost done, he says gently. Before you can even ask, done with? This bit of the story, the bit where you wandered into something stranger than yourself. You raise an eyebrow. That's very specific. He chuckles. Most people wander into stories thinking they're tourists. Few realize they've been conscripted into myth. Sounds exhausting. Oh, it is. He agrees cheerfully. But you've done well. The man gestures to a large tapestry hanging between two olive trees. It wasn't there a moment ago, but now that it's here, it looks like it always has been. You walk toward it, woven in thread of impossible hues, some of which might actually be moods. Rather than colors, is your journey. The pirates, the nymphs, the goat priestess with the lozenge obsession, even the moment you accidentally sat on a cursed flute. At the very end of the tapestry, the thread unravels just slightly. An open weave, a question mark made of golden fibers. What happens next? You ask. That depends, the man replies. Do you want to wake up? You pause. That's a big one. Because if you do, he continues, you'll probably forget most of this. It'll slip sideways in your memory, turn into a half-remembered dream, or the weirdest nap you ever took. You look at the tapestry again, and if I stay, you'll eventually become part of the pattern. He says it like it's not a bad thing. You sit down beside him. The olive tree casts a kind shade. A breeze moves gently through the leaves, carrying the scent of roasted barley and candle wax. Historians still argue whether these kinds of mythic experiences were real trance journeys, elaborate rituals, or just the byproduct of particularly enthusiastic wine. Says your internal trivia voice again. You smile. Maybe all three. The man takes something out of his pocket. It's a small glass vial filled with deep red liquid, thicker than wine, thinner than honey. Final choice. He says, one sip, and you wake up, you take the vial, hold it up to the light. It sparkles a bit, like it's made of memory and poetry and that feeling you get when a song knows exactly what you needed. You pause. Then you hand it back. Not yet. He nods. Thought so. He places it carefully back in his robe, like a waiter putting away a dessert. No one ordered, but everyone secretly hoped for. You're not the first to hesitate, he says. Dionysus hesitated too. Once, you look up, he almost stayed mortal. Gave up the god stuff. All of it. Why didn't he? The man smiles wistfully. He remembered what it was like to dance with stars in his blood. You both fall into silence. Eventually, he stands and stretches, his joints popping like a bag of olive pits. I should be off. He says, places to haunt, grapes to admire. Will I see you again? He raises a brow. That depends. Do you plan on getting lost in a myth twice? You smile. Probably. Then yes. He tips an invisible hat. and with a crackle of breeze and a faint smell of thyme, he's gone. You lie back against the tapestry, using the rolled-up fig pouch as a pillow, somewhere in the distance. The flute starts again, tentative notes becoming a lullaby. You let the melody wrap around you like warm cloth. The world dims just a little more, and you rest. Because stories, even the strange ones, always know when to hush. You drift, not entirely asleep, not quite awake somewhere between myth and memory. Like a boat resting in the shallows with no tide to chase. The sounds around you soften on it. Cicadas buzz like a lullaby that forgot its lyrics. The breeze keeps threading between the olive leaves with that steady, sighing rhythm. And yet, you're aware just enough. Something shifts beside you. You open one eye only because the other still refuses to cooperate and see a shape crouching by the tapestry. It's a child. At least, it looks like a child. Hair tangled. Eyes far too knowing. They're rearranging the final threads of your story, tugging at the loose golden question mark you left behind. Every time they touch the weave, it shimmers not with light, but with possibility. What are you doing? You ask, voice thick with sleep and fig aftertaste. The child shrugs, tidying up, adding a twist. That's ominous. Nah, they grin. Just adding a footnote. You sit up slowly. Who are you? You pluck a fig from a nearby basket, one that absolutely wasn't there earlier, and take a bite before answering. I'm the part of stories that doesn't get written down. The whispered version. The wink behind the curtain. You frown. That's not very helpful. Neither are most stories. They shoot back, mouth full. But people keep telling them anyway. You lean back again, watching the sky turn that pre-dusk color that seems like the gods are still arguing over what palette to use. A goat bleats in the distance. You sincerely hope it's not your old acquaintance from the boat. The child continues playing with the tapestry, tying a red thread through one section. This part's good. They say, you made a joke at the wrong time, but it worked. Sounds on brand. They pull the fabric tighter, nodding a few moments together. You know, most people don't get this far. This far in what? The story, the nap, the myth. Usually they wake up during the pirate bit, or bail when the goat starts giving advice. You grin. I did think about it, but you stayed. That matters. You stretch, joints popping, and glance toward the horizon. There's a soft gold light spreading through the trees now, like the sun is slowly pouring honey over the whole scene. The child pulls a small scroll from behind their back and unrolls it. Want to see the alternate ending? You raise an eyebrow. There was another one. There's always another one. They show it to you. The parchment is covered in tiny, dancing letters, some in ancient Greek, others in doodles. You see a version of yourself as a pirate captain, another as a wandering oracle with a penchant for terrible puns, one where you just open a vineyard and name every wine after a different mythological goat. Tempting. You say, pointing to the goat label. They agree, but I think I'll stick with this ending. The child nods, folding the scroll with care. It's a good one. Quiet, a little sad, but warm, like fig jam. Exactly like fig jam. They tuck the scroll into the robe, give the tapestry one last pat, and hop to their feet. Gotta run. There's a dream in Mesopotamia that needs sorting. Too many donkeys. You want to ask more who they are? Really, why they care about your story. But before you can form the question, they're gone. Not vanished with magic. Just stepped around a tree and disappeared like they were never meant to be seen leaving. You lie there again, watching clouds that look like amphorae, and sheep, and possibly one disgruntled satyr. And slowly, you start to feel that tug again. The soft current that calls you back. Back to the boat. Back to your hammock. Your body. Your life with its very mortal aches and mortal tasks. But something's changed. You're not the same, you who climbed aboard that pirate ship half a dream ago. You've danced with myths, eaten story fruit, laughed with a god, and passed a nap trial judged by a donkey. You're carrying something now. Not a relic, not a divine gift, just quiet, a deeper kind. The kind that echoes slightly, like it was carved out by laughter and left to cool in the dark. Historians still argue, says the sleepier part of your mind, whether Dionysian myths were metaphors, morality tales, or invitations. You close your eyes. They were probably all three. The wind starts to hum again, and you hum along. Not quite a melody, more like a memory with rhythm. And somewhere, deep inside your half-dreaming self, you feel the boat start to sway again just a little. The nap is nearly over, but the myth lingers. You lie still for a while. Not asleep, not exactly awake. Just nestled in that soft, in-between place where dreams go to breathe and the world is too gentle to interrupt. The grove around you has taken on a golden glow. Not the harsh shimmer of noon, nor the stark drama of sunset, just a warm sit of light, like someone has brushed everything with melted candle wax. You stretch out an arm and touch the tapestry beside you. The threads are cool, but pulse faintly under your fingers. They're still alive, still weaving. You wonder how many others have left their stories in these fibers. How many nap travelers, pirate guests, accidental myth hoppers have passed through before. Probably more than you'd guess, and fewer than you'd expect. A rustle from behind. You don't flinch this time, because you've learned in Dionysian space. Rustles are often just someone offering snacks. Sure enough, it's a satyr, a new one smaller, rounder, possibly younger. He offers you a handful of candied pine nuts and a wineskin with a cork shaped like a tiny theater mask. Peace offering, he says, voice gravelly but kind. For what? For the confusion, the weirdness, the goat-related miscommunication. Dionysian myths aren't neat. You chuckle. You think he sits beside you, cross-legged, the wineskin gurgling softly as it resettles. You handled it well. He says, Did I? You didn't run to save. You laughed when you should have cried. You followed the dance, even when the rhythm made no sense. I mostly followed snacks. You correct him. Same thing. He grins. This realm teaches through appetite. You take a sip from the wineskin. It tastes like nostalgia for a party you haven't had yet. He pats the tapestry. It's ready. You can wake up now. You nod. But you don't move. Because despite everything, the pirate chaos, the talking goat, the sleepy forest lectures on fermentation, you've grown fond of this place. Even its absurdities have rhythm now. And this moment, this very moment, sitting beside a half-drunk satyr while the light glows like burnt caramel, it's almost too peaceful to leave. Can I take anything with me? You ask. The satyr rummages in his pouch and hands you a tiny object wrapped in cloth. It's a grapeseed. Dry, dark, nearly weightless. Plant it in your world, he says. It might not grow into a vine. It might become a joke, or a story, or just a little more kindness in your laugh. You hold the seed in your palm. It hums slightly. Probably just your imagination. Probably. Then, from the edges of the grove, the world begins to soften. The leaves blur into watercolor. The sky turns to silk. The sounds stretch like taffy being pulled gently apart. You lie back, one final time. The satyr stands, brushes off his fur, and gives you a casual salute. Good nap, he says. Good myth, you reply. And then everything dims. Slowly, quietly, all night like the end of a lullaby whispered underwater. The story is done, but the dream that lingers like wine on your breath? Wind down 300 words. And now, the grove fades fully from view. The satyr's footsteps melt into silence. The tapestry curls up, thread by thread, folding your journey into the folds of a dream, too soft to wake from completely. Let your breath slow, just a little more. Feel your limbs get heavier like they've absorbed the rhythm of myth and want to hold it a while longer. There's no need to remember every detail. Let the pirate ship sail away. Let the fig-scented breeze drift off across the waves. Let Dionysus slumber on in some cozy celestial hammock, still dreaming halfway through his wine. You did well. Traveler, you wandered through a tale with your eyes half closed and your heart half curious. You listened when the goat spoke, and you laughed when the universe got a bit absurd. And now, there's nothing else to do. The sky is dark velvet now. A few sleepy stars peeking through like they're checking on you before bed. There's a soft hum in the air, maybe a distant flute. Or maybe just your breath settling into rhythm with the quiet. You're safe. You're wrapped in story, and softness, and sleep. So let go of the day behind you. Let go of the plot twist and the tangled threads. There's no need to reach for the ending. The story reached you. And now, rest. Let it all dissolve like mist in morning sun. Good night, friend. End of script. Sweet dreams.